Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, claims of corruption and a shadow political network. Could it all bring down the Turkish government? We look at the ongoing political crisis. I have lost track the number of times that we have done web exclusives on Turkey in the last few weeks.
Right.
Malika Blau, digital producer.
I don't blame you.
I have lost track, but you haven't, right?
Right. Well, that's my job. Well, there have been quite a few hashtags coming out of Turkey, and some of them in the past few months have actually trended worldwide. Now, one of them in particular that I'm keeping an eye on is one that we covered not too long ago here at the stream, the Turkish police heroes. Now, this hashtag translates to 5 police heroes in Turkish, and it shows solidarity among netizens online for police who were indicted, so to speak, in a corruption probe. So this is interesting, of course, because we've usually online seen criticism of the police. Now, that's just one of the narratives that we're seeing online. There are many more, and of course, we want to hear from you as well. So we want you to join the conversation with hashtag AJStream.
He's ready for the conversation in the studio. He is Alp Aslandoğan, and Alp is the president of the Alliance for Shared Values. That's a US-based organization affiliated with the Gulen Islamic movement in Turkey. He's also co-editor of the book Muslim Citizens of the Globalized World, Contributions of the Gulen Movement. Alp, it's great to have you here in the stream.
My pleasure, thank you.
Going to make you get to work straight away. Very briefly explain the Gulen movement for people who are not familiar with it.
Absolutely. For English-speaking audiences who are familiar with the American history, the closest thing would be the civil rights movement. In some senses, it's like the civil rights movements of Turkey. It is started out as a community of faithful people around the cause of education. In an environment where there was political rivalry and anarchy, where there was ongoing discrimination by the government toward observant Muslim citizens of the country. In this environment, Mr. Gulen, who is a very influential preacher, put out a project to focus on education and educate the people of Anatolia, that is mainland Turkey, to allow them to have career opportunities and also to end the political rivalry and anarchy and also the discrimination that was ongoing at the time.
Sure.
So this, what started out as a small pious community around him as a preacher, now has become a very large civil society movement that is still focused on education, interfaith dialogue, and also humanitarian assistance.
Now, what you've just said is incredibly important to our conversation. It's a little part of the jigsaw puzzle. We'll be putting that in the rest of the puzzle in just a moment. Let me tell you a little bit more of background, though, for today's discussion. In Turkey, a corruption investigation with claims of bribery, illegal money transfers, and possible links to high-ranking ministers is fueling one of the country's biggest political controversies in years. Graft allegations have led to a wave of resignations, and late Monday night, 350 police officers were reassigned. Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan says that the corruption claims are part of a mini coup orchestrated by international interests. Some believe the political turmoil is the result of Turkey's so-called deep state. That's a parallel and unofficial network of power that has long influenced government institutions. So could deep state politics eventually bring down the Turkish government? With us to talk about this, we have Hakan Kamuz. He's a lobbyist and consultant for Turkish businesses. He's also a supporter of the Turkish government. And via Skype in Istanbul, we have Aytu Şazmaz. He's a political science researcher who's been following Turkish politics. He has concerns about the ruling AK party and also the Gulen movement. So, gentlemen, it's great to have you all here in the stream. Let me start with Hakan, first of all. This idea of deep state. As far as Turkish people are concerned, can you explain what that actually means? Give us an example.
The example would be, pleasure to be on the show, first of all. Thank you for inviting me. And the clear example of that simply would be, you could be elected into government, but not necessarily governing the country, which is what the deep state would expect you to do. And this has been somewhat practiced in Turkey quite a long time, where you had the staunch character of a state and its bureaucrats or its elements have controlled a daily business of the government, even though you had elected governments in place.
Right.
That's how Turkish people will see it, and that's how they interpret the deep state concept.
So it sounds quite vague. Is it just a vague sense of somebody else's control that's not your government? Or can you give me a specific example?
Well, a specific example would be the overarching power the military had in Turkey when other governments were in power until 2002, when AK Party was elected into government.
Okay. I can hear you piping up. What did you want to add about deep state, our understanding of deep state?
Actually, what people meant by deep state in Turkey was in 1990s, basically. There was a network within the army, within the judiciary, within the police, within the intelligence agency of Turkey, and they were running basically the security apparatus of Turkey, and especially the war against the Kurdish armed movement. So this was the deep state in 1990s. But when we came to 2000s, the deep state changed. The deep state transformed in Turkey, and especially people are arguing that this happened due to with the intrusion of the Gulen movement, the bureaucrats of the Gulen movement, to the bureaucracy, to the judiciary, and to the police force of Turkey. And this is well documented by two books in Turkey. The prominent journalist, the prominent investigative journalist Ahmet Şık, and a former police officer, Hanefi Avcı, documented these allegations against the Gulen movement.
Okay.
So this is the deep state we are talking about right now. But I should say that the deep state now is not as violent as it was in 1990s.
Malika?
Well, our community
I
has
could
its
agree
own
with
thoughts.
that in the sense that in 1997, where you had state elements, what we call deep state, wanted to somehow discredit the government of Dr. Erdogan at that time, and they wanted to oust him, and they used every means possible within their powers to oust him, and they've successfully ousted the elected government in 1997. That was a clear action of deep state at that time.
So,
which is what the Prime Minister is currently talking about.
Gentlemen, I see that you're coming from this from slightly different angles. Let me just add the community in and then come back to you.
Well, definitely, our community, as I was saying, Femi, has their own thoughts on what the deep state is and what its impact has been on Turkish citizens. Online, Sinan tweets in, a deep state is one that it appeared, and now it's trying to alternate with what he says is an illegal way. He says it's kind of a coup attempt. And Alpin, of course, this is not the only tweet we see that has termed it in this way, a quote-unquote coup attempt. Why is there this sentiment, and is it valid at all?
At the beginning I said if we base our discussion on facts, then many of these allegations actually evaporate. We have a massive corruption scandal at hand, and there is tangible evidence. We are talking about shoebox of millions of dollars, money in the bookshelves of a minister's son. We're talking about the Iranian Turkish businessman who is charged with laundering money for Iran and having linked to ministers. So these are the facts of the case. Now the government's reaction, or at least some of the leaders...
These are not necessarily the facts of the case. I would disagree with Dr. Alp, because I have been in the business of law for 15 years in the United Kingdom, and the standards by which we are discussing this whole so-called corruption allegation is nowhere near what you in democratic society would call standards. This is a complete and utter baseless allegations. They have detained 52 people at dawn raids from their houses, from their children, in front of their children. 52 people, only to be released them within literally a day and a half. Only 3 private citizens are now in detention, and they're being questioned. This is not a corruption.
Why did
this
the
is just
government
a baseless
relocate
allegation.
1,000 police officers if there are no bases for the allegations? Why did the government in 15 days relocate 1,500 police officers in 2 weeks?
Let me explain to you. Talking about government or a state organizations being corrupted and the government making a decision to re-establish positions of the police officers are 2 different things. You cannot connect the 2. When you're making allegations about corruption at high levels, you must have a solid evidence that exists that the government and the government bodies are corrupted. You're only talking about 3 private individuals. This is baseless in that sense that they're trying to attack Prime Minister's reputation, because for 11 years this man stands on the political ground of being clean and uncorrupted, and he is. The only way you can somehow discredit him and take his credibility is by saying somehow him and his government are corrupted, and you have no base for that. Let me tell you something. They're trying to create public opinion that there is some kind of massive corruption going on in Turkey. That's just basically not true. There is no evidence of it at all whatsoever. They're trying to attack, tarnish their
take a pause for a moment. I too take a pause for a moment because the rest of us are all catching up and trying to keep up with you. So I'm going to say this once and maybe have to say it many times, that there are allegations of corruption that have come up in the last couple of months, the last couple of weeks. They remain allegations of corruption. That's very, very important for this discussion.
You should assume that all the charges are not guilty until proven otherwise.
So this is important. This is important for us to remember this.
Exactly.
I don't have to repeat
Professor
it over
Arch
and over
should
again.
know better. There's a concept of habeas corpus exists. And if any legal challenges to be done to the government, then let's base it on these principles that we all adhere to. At the end of the day, you must have solid evidences for you to raid somebody's house, take them away from their family, from their bed, and then take him to the prosecutor's office, only to say to him, look, you got 2 minutes to explain yourself. You either tell me now or just go away. And this is not a normal legal procedure. Sir, we're looking at the standards here that doesn't exist in the democratic society.
Okay,
These kind of things
take a breath for me for a moment, because the conversation is with our online community as well, and they want to get into the conversation too.
Well, it's interesting. The things that I'm seeing are taking into account both of what Aytu and what Hakan are saying. But Aytu, I want you to have a listen to this video comment from someone with a nuanced point of view.
I believe that Turkey has indeed come a long way under the AKP, the Justice and Development Party, and Erdogan. But at the same time, I believe that the Kemalist military authoritarianism has been replaced by Erdogan's authoritarianism. And this is very much related to Erdogan's worldview, the consolidation of the AKP's power, as well as the withdrawal of liberal and more moderate voices from the AKP.
So Aytu, he uses the word authoritarianism, but of course, at the end of the day, Erdogan has won 3 elections and he's widely popular. So is that sentiment fair?
The sentiment that he's becoming authoritarian?
Yes.
Yes, definitely there is. I mean, definitely he's becoming more authoritarian, and the people are feeling that.
Let me add.
No, this is completely wrong. You cannot say about a government which is in power, who has increased their numbers of votes 3 times in general elections. It's been subjected to 11 elections and a referendum, each time increasing the numbers of people who support it. Even now, after so-called allegations of corruption, there's 4 separate polls that's been done, and in all of those polls, the numbers have gone up, and they're still talking about popular government. Say again?
You should also let us talk. I mean, winning elections is not the only basis to become democratic. You shouldn't use police violence against peaceful protesters.
Look, I shall remain silent for you to talk. I'm not trying to block you from talking. I just want you to talk.
Okay, so
everything you say based on the facts and evidences, not allegations.
Okay, Hakan, do take a pause, then Aytu can actually respond to you. Aytu, go ahead.
I said, I mean, winning elections is not the only basis to become democratic. I mean, you shouldn't use police violence against peaceful protesters. You should be able to explain why you relocate 1,500 police officers in 2 weeks, although you've been in power since 2002. There are so many bases of being democratic. I mean, winning the elections, Mr. Erdogan, the prime minister, is also having this argument all the time. But know, I mean, Hakan was also referring to these universal democratic values. Winning elections is not enough anymore.
All right, so Malika, I have to say, we were having this conversation as we were getting ready for this show. It's complex, it's rich, it's fascinating. For you in Turkey.
Yes.
For the rest of us around the world, we're trying to keep up with you, and we're doing a really good job right now. But I also want to bring back in out, because the Gulen movement and the AK party, they had a very good relationship for quite a long time, and then now not so much. Explain what happened, and maybe how this perhaps plays into what we're seeing right now with these allegations of corruption at very high levels.
Absolutely. The so-called Gulen movement, and participants would like to refer to it as Hizmet or Jamia because that's more inclusive, because people don't want to attribute this whole phenomenon just to one person. But this movement is really about values such as democracy, basic human rights, respecting every human as a being with dignity. These are some of the core values. And for the first 2 terms of the current government, Hizmet movement participants, by and large, have supported AKP, because AKP stood for eliminating the military dominance in Turkish politics.
So what did the Gulen movement get out of supporting the AK party?
The support among the participants is directly linked with the democratic stance of the political actors. As you see a decrease in the democratic reforms and a tendency toward more authoritarian actions,
So
you see
basically
the support decreasing.
Okay, so basically you're supporting the reforms, and then what happened? Why is there now so much animosity?
The third term of the present government is very, very different. I will say it's almost completely contrary to their record in the first two terms. Just for the record, I have voted once in my life, and I voted for AKP, just for the record. So their performance in the third term is very different from their first two terms.
So it's a political breakup because you don't like what the AK
It is a
parties-
matter of democracy.
Right.
There are some very worrisome
No.
trends.
Can I intervene here? I gotta say something right now. I mean, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Prime Minister, and has allowed Gulen movement and their supporters most of the support they required for a long time, and this must be referenced here. And they have grown in strength, and nobody denies some of the good work they have done. However, being like Dr. Alp has described the organization, interest group or a social organization cannot dictate to any government in any democratically associated country whatever their policy must be accepted, and if it's not, you're a bad guy. I.e., when we were working together, it's fine, but when what we demand from you, what we tell you to do, you don't do, therefore you are now a bad government. That is not acceptable. So we've got to be fair in our analysis here and be factual. AKP and the Prime Minister is governing Turkey. They're not the government of few, they're the government of all. And they have to think for the country, for the people, and that's what they are there for. If they are somehow not answering the demands of a certain pressure group, it does not make them a bad government, and you don't trump up charges of corruption and allegation of corruptions just so that you can somehow affiliate them with this kind of...
okay, all right, thank you.
Can I ask something about, I mean, Mr. Hakan just said the Prime Minister gave what the Gulen network requested. I mean, this whole sentence shows us how authoritarian, because he personally gave what the Gulen movement, which is not a real organization in Turkey. I mean, we don't see them as a legal organization of a non-governmental association or non-governmental organization or an interest group.
What's your question, Aytu?
This itself shows us the authoritarian tendencies growing in Turkey. Where is democracy here? I'm asking to both other guests. I mean, one person giving what an illegal organization, not an illegal organization, but an hidden organization.
Okay, I hear you. Alp hears you too. Alp, go ahead.
My response is Hizmet movement or Jamia has been in Turkey for over 4 decades now. It started in the late 60s and it has grown continuously throughout this period, despite severe attacks, especially during the 90s by the military-dominated judiciary at the time, and also media smear campaigns. So it has grown tremendously throughout this period, even many decades before AKP. So it is a civil society movement, and throughout this time, the participants have supported political actors by voting for them, by raising their voices through the media and other organizations when they aligned around values such as democracy. And when they oppose them, it is again because of the values. There's nothing more to it. And the other allegations that my counterparts are referring to, they are simply allegations because they are not based on objective facts.
All right. Okay. So Malika.
Well, Hakan, even among supporters of Erdogan online, what I am seeing is some frustration by people online who are saying there are still allegations that need looking into corruption-wise. On Twitter, Nimet says it is partially correct that Turkey's prime minister says foreign forces are trying to bring down his government, and this person agrees with that sentiment, but says it doesn't mean that the corruption scandal isn't true, and Erdogan has to solve the corruption problem. Another person, before you answer, another person says Turkey should adopt an approach that scrutinizes the allegations. So have the allegations been thoroughly scrutinized, as this person's asking?
Totally agree. Look, corruption happens everywhere. Come on, I mean, in England, only a few years ago, you guys remember there was a massive corruption scandal in the entire parliament. Most of the MPs were extra charging money for their housings and whatnot. You know what happened here. In Turkey, I am not saying there is no corruption. There may well be a corruption. This government has a clean record on this issue. I want our global audience to understand this government has a clean policies on this. They had an MP who was at one point alleged to have corrupted relationship with some company. They've withdrawn him straight away. There was few mayors who actually found to be corrupted, and they were arrested and tried and whatnot. This government holds on these values like dear, because this is what they base their whole political stance for. It's their identity. And the fact that they're receiving these attacks from their own judiciary with trumped up charges that they are somehow corrupted, and they're trying to create this image of the government to the global audience that we are talking to right now, is why the Prime Minister and the entire government is angry about it, because this is what they've been tackling since they came to power. So I understand there can be a corruption in Turkey. Nobody's saying everybody's so clean, but it will be done properly. Judicial processes will take place, investigations will take place. It will be based on the facts, evidences. People will be tried and judged according to it. We do have a legal system in place. Turkey is not a banana republic. But at the same time, people in power.
1,500 police officers in 2 weeks. Why did he sack the prosecutor who was investigating the issue? Why did he bar the police go to the people who were alleged on the December 25th? Did the Prime Minister in England do that?
When you're actually faced by an entity that has designed their entire judiciary conduct just so that they can politically undermine you, you deal with it politically. Do understand the point. These people have done their investigations 2 years ago. They've concluded it 6 months ago. They're holding the files in their hand, not acting upon it, just so that they can wait only 3 months.
I'm going to ask you to finish your sentence.
Femi, just one point.
No, but Hakan, unless you want to read the news, I'm going to stop you right now, because I don't think you're qualified to read the Al Jazeera news, and we are running out of time.
Okay.
I see Alp, he's smiling.
Why not?
I know
Give me an opportunity, I will do that
jump
too.
in, and I can believe that. But right now, we're going to look at some of the other stories that Malika is going to share with us from the stream, and we will get back to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com in just a moment. Malika.
We start in Bahrain, where netizens are sending thanks to South Korea for suspending exports of tear gas to the kingdom. Korea's defense acquisition program cited Bahrain's political instability, deaths caused by tear gas, and complaints from human rights groups as factors in its decision. In October, we covered efforts by UK-based advocacy group Bahrain Watch to protest an alleged government bid for a large quantity of tear gas. The government has said the tear gas is necessary to maintain order against groups stoking unrest. A document allegedly leaked from Bahrain's Interior Ministry solicited 1.6 million tear gas canisters for a country of 1.3 million people. Well, Bahraini opposition activists took their campaign to the source, targeting tear gas manufacturers to ask them to stop the shipment. And today, they're celebrating victory. Baharna tweets, "Thanks to South Korea for all Korean people. Thanks for #StopTheShipment." And next, we head to Tunisia, where medical students are on strike. They're calling for a revolution of the scalpel. Take a look. Chanting health, freedom, and national dignity, protesters are marching through the streets in white coats to oppose a draft law that would force them to work for the government for 3 years. The government says the law will improve access to care for all Tunisians, but students say it will force them to work in underfunded hospitals without equipment. Some students have also taken their protests to the classroom, refusing to sit for exams. Amin sums it up in this tweet: "This mobilization is historic in the history of medicine." We've got more on that on our website, so head to stream.aljazeera.com and tell us your thoughts in the comments. Femi?
That Bahrain story is really remarkable. How long did that campaign take before the change happened?
Well, we covered it in October, and since then, we've seen lots of tweets on it and using that hashtag #StopTheShipment. So kind of a social media victory.
Really impressive. All right, so moving on. What will we be doing on tomorrow's program? Well, Russia's Olympics. Should a country that's been criticized for its human rights abuses be rewarded with the world's most prestigious sporting event? That is a good question, but a good question for another day. Tweet us at #AJStream. Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com, where we'll continue to talk about Turkey. See you online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streamed Online Post Show. It's great to see you. We have been discussing charges of corruption facing the Turkish government and the possible role of deep state politics in the country. Going to get right back to that conversation. Hakan was begging me to be able to finish his sentence, and I was begging Hakan to stop talking because we had the show to end, the main show. So Hakan, I wasn't being mean, I was just watching the clock very carefully. Now you can finish your thought.
Okay, I was just going to say to you, I mean, which is kind of a main point. I mean, the perception, obviously, the AK Party and who their sympathizers are have this, they were all prepared so that they can actually have the maximum impact just before the elections, local elections that's going to take part on 30th of March. And because it's timed perfectly so they can fit in with the corrupt allegation and the AKP government, it is political. There are many signs and evidences that this is all political, and that's why it's frustrating, and that's why it's making people like me and many like me angry about it, because you wouldn't expect this to happen from brothers that we embrace and people that kind of we worked with for a long time, and for them to then come back and do this so that they can undermine and discredit.
Okay, so let me just stop you there.
The Prime Minister himself.
Come back and do this, Hakan. What do you mean by that? Come back and do this. Let's just spell it out.
What I mean to say is they have been supported by this government for a long time. And most of their affiliates have been in the judiciary, they've been in the government positions, they've been in, they have actually helped AKP and Turkish government come to the place where they are now. Yet they have now used their positions to undermine the very prime minister they have which supported them, to undermine him and discredit his party and his government on the trumped up charges. The charges has no legal basis and no evidences whatsoever. I mean, the fact that Dr. Alp is using massive corruption charges is a sign that is so exaggerated. You're talking 3 private individuals, which is now being questioned. It's not being charged yet. And everything else was a complete hot air. And now it's like being presented to the entire global audience that we're talking to today as if there is this massive. There isn't. It's nothing like that at all. It's being portrayed as, which is why it's heartbreaking.
This is why I didn't allow you to finish your sentence, because we were being way over time there. But I hear what you're saying. You have to respond.
I think many allegations are made here about political motivations of individual prosecutors, judges, police investigators, and there is no evidence presented about whether they were simply doing their job and conducting investigation, or whether they had other motives. And people who come up with these accusations, they should also present evidence. When I was referring to some facts, I was referring to stash of cash found in homes, and the person who had those cash at home, they've admitted having those cash in their homes, millions of dollars in shoeboxes and in bookshelves.
So
we're talking about video and audio.
So this is the chief executive of Halkbank,
which is a bank accused of helping Iran evade sanctions. So these are serious accusations. So they should be taken seriously.
Sir,
and the legal
this is not an accusation. It's not helping Iran evade sanctions at all. This is all done by the scrutiny of the United States Fed, the entire monetary community. The whole world knew Iran sells gas to Turkey and they get paid in precious materials because they cannot do the transactions in monetary terms, and the whole world knew this was legal. There is nothing illegal about that, which is the point that I'm trying to raise here.
All right, so gentlemen, I'm going to push things on just a little bit. Malika.
Well, I wanted Aytu's perspective on this because, of course, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Femi and I, that there were lots of hashtags trending online about this, and they've reached a global audience. One of them that I'm pulling up here has the Turkish hashtag up here. I will not presume to pronounce it, but it's pro-government supporters who say, "We won't let Erdogan be eaten." On the other hand, you also have this hashtag where supporters of Gulen have called on people to not slander the leader. So in your view, Aytu, is Turkish society as divided as it appears to be on social media?
Both yes and no. I mean, there are very strong supporters of both the government and the Gulen movement. So, and they are also very powerful in the social media. So you see their voices very much. But the ordinary people are not that divided. And I think the ordinary people see that there is corruption within the government, because the allegations are not only related to the Iranian case. I mean, the allegations are much more powerful when it comes to the construction sector. I mean, the urban planning minister of Erdogan just resigned, saying that Erdogan should also resign. And also the deep state allegations.
About is this.
The deep state allegations are
also
public prosecutor who was actually
the public prosecutor who brought up these charges. Femi was found to be gone on a paid holiday by the construction company that he's trying to charge. He has been gone to Dubai a holiday.
I'm talking about Mr. Erdogan Bayraktar.
What you're saying is very interesting, but also I2 is making some interesting points too. And when you were talking, I2 actually listened to you. So just pay in the same courtesy and we'll come back to you. I2, carry on.
The deep state allegations are also very well perceived by the Turkish society, I think. I mean, people know that the Gulen movement has these connections. I mean, otherwise the Zaman, the media outlet of the Gulen movement, wouldn't claim the ownership of the operations. The Fethullah Gulen, the leader of the movement, wouldn't send a letter to the prime minister asking for a more peaceful environment. So the deep state, I mean, both the deep state allegations and the corruption allegations are very positively perceived by the Turkish society. But the staunch advocates of both movements are very powerful in the social media. But I think the ordinary citizens see the good picture, the rightful picture.
May I provide maybe?
And my point was the public prosecutor who actually brought these cases, up recently found to be on a holiday 22 times in 1 year, and he's on the wages of about £2,000 a month. And the last holiday he went in Dubai, which was paid by a construction company that my friend was talking about. Only recently, 2 days ago, this came out.
Even this what kind of corruption charges are we talking about here?
Is it the accused or the accuser? Which one is the corrupt?
All right, so gentlemen, I'm impressed that you're able to keep up with the nitty-gritty of all of these details and cases, but Alp did want to add something.
I want to clarify something.
Yes.
The Hizmet movement is actually being dragged into this debate. This debate is about corruption and the associated authoritarian actions of the government, which actually they come together. This movement has always been about values, and when they supported political actors, that was about values. And
but you must
the lack of support is also about values.
Understand why, if the Gulen movement has been very much associated with the AK party for at least 2 terms, and then suddenly they seem to
You can see the correlation very clearly when you look at the actions of the government.
You can see why there's pushback and why people are annoyed with the
when you look at the lack of support or the opposition from the, let's say, newspapers and TV organizations that are considered within the movement, you can see a correlation with the anti-democratic actions or policies on behalf of the government. For instance, there have been numerous reports of blacklisting and labeling citizens, and certain documents have been leaked to the press.
So these are all allegations, and I'm just going to skip across from these because, as I said, it's a very difficult conversation for us to have because they're allegations. They're not actually.
There are also
and as you said,
objective.
You wanted to work with facts.
Which is the whole point.
Okay.
Femi. Thank you, Femi. Femi, thank you very much.
For thanking me, and I'm just going to thank
nothing
you.
But allegations.
I can really, and I love it when guests talk. There's occasionally I just need you just to take a collective breath, just for a moment. I don't like to ask you not to speak, but I do want to get the community in here.
Oh, thank you. Well, this came up a little bit earlier, the words elections in March, and those are going to be local elections. So I want to take it to this because a couple of our community members have brought this point up. Aidan on Twitter says, let's assume that this government fell. Who will come in its place? There's no other contender. Another person writes in, Mustafa on Twitter says, what will be the next once the support is lost behind Erdogan? Any power? Is there any ready opposition to take power? So I, too, you of course have your criticisms of Erdogan's administration. Who will take the reins after him?
This is definitely contingent on the unfolding of events and on the positioning of the political actors. I mean, the opposition parties are trying to prepare better for the local elections, but we don't know whether the public will trust them. So this is definitely, I don't want to speak for the whole Turkish public at this point because I cannot know how the voting behavior will change, because Turkey is not a very much consolidated democracy when it comes to voting behavior. So we don't know yet how this will change the support behind AK Party. And let's face it, the Gulen movement is also an Islamist movement, and the most powerful Islamist party,
if I can say a few words about that,
is the AK Party right now. So we don't know whether they will change their votes. We don't know.
Alp says that the Gulen movement is not an Islamist movement.
The trend, the school of thought where Hizmet movement came about, is about social and cultural Islam. It is actually, it has stood against the idea of political Islam for many decades, and because of that, it has been targeted by the predecessor of the current ruling party, the Erdogan's party, in the past. So there is a very clear difference there. This is about civil Islam and cultural Islam. It is not about politics.
Like you said. So.
Which is why when we started our conversation in the main show, this is like a critical piece of the jigsaw puzzle. It's really important for us to hear from you how you feel your movement should be described. I'm going to end with something that I want to share with everybody. There are a couple of stories that are floating around right now. Turkish woman detained over shoebox protests. This goes back to that chief executive we were talking about, Hakan Bank, who is suspected of some corruption. He was found with apparently $4.5 million in cash in shoeboxes in his home. Also, another shoebox protest here. This is it a crime to perform on stage with a shoebox? An orchestra performing for New Year's Eve went on stage with shoeboxes. So this is kind of making a mockery of what's happening with alleged corruption allegations. How many times can I use allegations and alleged in one sentence? Not enough, apparently, but you know what I'm trying to say here. That it's making a mockery of how Turkey is being seen inside and perhaps also outside of the country. So I just want to get a very quick thought from each of our guests about what is this doing to Turkey's international reputation? Just very briefly, Alp, closing thoughts.
I think especially the charges that came out of the political leadership that there is an international conspiracy that is doing this to the government. I think that is damaging Turkey's reputation very much.
Aitu, what do you think the rest of the world is now thinking about Turkey?
This is how democratic Turkey became under AK Party and with the alliance of the Gulen movement so far. So, the government cannot even give the right of peaceful protesting with this mockery. This is how democratic we became. I just leave the comment here.
So Turkish citizens, Hakan, some of them are making fun of their own government, their own prime minister. What do you think the rest of the world is now, how they're viewing Turkey?
As far as some of those people you're mentioning here, this is just semantics. This is just a level that they can actually express their whatever they want to, express. We have no problem with some people having shoeboxes in their hands. However, government has been in power for 11 years. It has a record of progress, further freedom, more liberalization of economy. This government stands on the clean political values. Everybody knows it. Just because some people do not like Recep Tayyip Erdogan does not mean this government will go away. Last election, 51%, and this election they expect more. And you guys will see on the 30th of March that they will have better votes, because nobody can outrun the will of people. The will of people showed last election, 51% voted this government in and this prime minister into the power.
Why do you talk on behalf of the will of the people then? So clearly, so certainly.
Because
how do you know?
I actually happen to think they're doing a very good job for Turkey. Looking at the history of the last 11 years, you can see and not deny some of the work that they have done in Turkey.
I'm just saying we'll see as a researcher.
Cannot.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying that AK Party will lose votes. We'll just see how these events will affect voting behavior. So, but I wouldn't speak so certainly about the voting behavior of Turkey. So.
I also want to...
No, because you will see within a very short period of time, whatever these trumped up charges of so-called corruption will fizzle away and people will see what the reality is. And I know, and the global audience should know, in Turkey when elections come, people always show their true colors and make their choices.
So
you've seen it in 1999, you've seen it in 2002, and you've seen it in the last 3 general elections and every other election that's taken place. People have shown their will.
Let me just remind you, Alp and Hakan and Aitu, those were your closing thoughts, and that is where I will leave them. Thank you very much. I love a great panel of guests who they could keep talking forever. Look at Hakan. Hakan hasn't even warmed up yet. He's ready for more conversation. Alp, I know he wanted to jump in, and also Aitu as well, but I'm going to leave the last word. The very last word with the community.
They have a lot to say, so I'm going to give them 2 words. One tweet from Mohammed Faisal who says, not everyone in Turkey agrees with Erdogan. They don't have to. Elections are coming. You can vote him out democratically, this person says. And on the other hand, Unicorn on Twitter says the AKP is not the perfect party, but I believe it's helped the country develop as much as possible, which I think no one other could do.
You know, Malika, I can feel the guest thoughts still coming towards me. I'm going to wrap up the show before they start talking again. On the next program, Russia's Olympics. Should a country that's criticized for its human rights abuses be rewarded with the world's most prestigious sporting event? We will tackle that issue on the next A-Day stream. Until then, see you online at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching. Take care.